Hi, I'm Astrid. I grew up in South Africa. Now I live in Sweden, and I've always loved books. I started writing my first novel when I was 12, and now I've found my niche in what I call transformation fiction, which is that I combine my passion for transformational life coaching and writing. In my teens, in my early teens, writing was just an outlet for me. It was just something I did. I did have this sort of in the background a dream that I would be a published author and would get famous out of it. I did have this feeling that I really wanted to receive an award for my writing. But as the years passed and I wrote more and felt insecure about talking about it to people, I told myself that my book was not Harry Potter. And look at how long it took J.K. Rowling to get her books published. So this left me with this feeling that I'm not good enough and my writing is not that good. No one's ever going to read my writing. And I need to find something more sensible to do with my time in terms of a career. And that meant that I then studied psychology at university and ended up taking anthropology as a elective in my first year. I loved anthropology so much that I actually now have a master's in social anthropology.
That's interesting. Now, I must ask you, now that you say you like anthropology that very much, can you share with me what do you really, what fascinates you about anthropology?
Being able to understand our human nature. As growing up in South Africa during the transition period from apartheid to democracy, I, I had all these people I knew who had different cultural backgrounds, who spoke different languages, and all that cultural output really made me think a lot about us as humans, but I couldn't really put it into context. I also have the added baggage, I guess you could call it, of the fact that my dad is Bavarian and moved to South Africa to study and met my mom. My mom is a second generation Italian. And all of that combined with the fact that I then went to a German school and didn't fit in because my dad was Bavarian, not North German, like many of the other kids' parents. And all of that kind of combined to make me confused about who I was. Because people would look at me and they'd say, well, you're the German girl. And I go, no, I'm not. I have no, I have no real ties to Germany. I mean, I'm Catholic. I'm not Lutheran. So these differences kind of really were difficult to get my head around as a teenager. And it was through studying anthropology that I kind of came to accept who I am and understand people I meet better.
You see, that is really interesting as a story. And I happen to be living in Italy. With me, somehow our story are just joining together as we are beginning to narrate it. I live in Verona in the northern part of Italy. So, where is your mom coming from? Or, okay, the second generation of Italian, you said. Is it? Can you tell me like which part of Italy is coming from? Because it's beginning to get more interesting now.
Absolutely. Ah, fair Verona. But no, my great grandparents were from Lucca and a town outside of Naples.
Ah, okay, okay. That's good. That's good. That's close enough. All right. Now let's go back to the
Yeah.
business of book publishing. How did you actually get started in your book publishing? Okay, I understand that you started writing, but then publishing is a different thing altogether, no? So tell me about that. How did it get started with you?
Absolutely. The thing was just over 2 years ago, I was on maternity leave with my daughter, and I was doing some personal growth courses and like expanding on my sense of self and my understanding of who I am in the world. And I came to the realization that one thing that's always been really important to me is writing. And I reached a point where I thought, if I don't publish now, I'll probably never do it and I'll always regret that. So then it was like, well, what am I waiting for? Going traditionally published, but I kind of had this feeling that if it took me 20 years to believe in myself and believe in my own writing, and I'd now reached this understanding of my own person and my own being, why would I spend time trying to convince other people in publishing houses that my work is worth publishing when the changes that have happened in publishing due to the technological revolution has made it possible for me to do it myself and to retain control over my work? Because as someone who's writing a niche that's unheard of, I don't fit into any of the bigger genres. I cross subgenres of fantasy all the time. And that meant, well, how am I going to convince a traditional publisher to take a risk, to take a look at something that's different, at fantasy with people of color, at fantasy that doesn't fit into any of the specific subgenres of fantasy that exist? And I thought, well, you know what? Let's just go for it. I'm ready, and I can make my books ready myself. So that's what I did.
That's interesting. So you take the bull by the horn and you really get it kicked and it work. Of course, it does work. It always work if you believe in yourself, no? And that is something that people really need to pay attention to. That is basta. So the question I want to ask now is that your initial book project. Tell me about it. That particular book that you published first. Tell me about the book.
Right. Well, here it is. Okay, it's called, oh, sorry, I need to bring it this way. It's called Aspiring, and it's a first part in a two-part series, The Sibling's Tale. Okay, so this one is a book I wrote when I was 19 during a gap year. I spent a wonderful summer holiday with my aunt in France. And I thought, well, now's my opportunity to write a story that's been sitting in my head for 4 years. And I just sat down one day and wrote it in 3 weeks by hand. I've learned a lot about publishing and writing. But yes, I wrote this manuscript out by hand with pen on paper. And it's essentially a retelling of the Grimm brothers' lesser known tale, Brother and Sister. And I had two questions, essentially. The first one was, why did the events of Brother and Sister take place? So what led up to the fairy tale? And that's what I cover in the first part of the series, which is Aspiring. And then I continued into the actual retelling of the story with this one, which is Becoming, part 2 of the Sibling's Tale. And that one, essentially, I wrote it as a single piece and then published it as 2 separate books because that was what I was recommended to do.
That's interesting. Now, you were recommended to do that based on the for is it for a marketing as a kind of a marketing strategy or for the book itself? Is there a kind of reason why that recommendation?
It was for a marketing strategy, yes. And on the whole, I think it was probably a bad decision because the 2 books belong together. It's supposed to be a single volume, even though the voice of the first part and the voice of the second part are very different. So it kind of made sense to split it. But in terms of what I've learned over the past 2 years since publishing, this this should have been published as a single book, and I will definitely republish it at some point as a single volume.